Hello, everyone. It is wonderful to see you here today. So we're tomorrow night we'll be halfway through our summer prosperity class. It is summer, and this is our tradition. For many years, we've done this class on Sunday evenings, and it has always been kind of a cornerstone of who we are. So much so that there are people in Asheville that refer to us as the Prosperity Church. Kind of like that. Not the church part, but the prosperity thing really works for me. And because that's who we are, apparently people know us that way. It was interesting. When I'm getting ready for my talk, I often, because I do my own PowerPoint slides, I go on to the internet, Google and other places, and look at images that might be appropriate for what I want to say. And I Googled prosperity this week, and an interesting slide came up that I wanted to share with you. It was on the first page. Now, I have no idea how the algorithms on Google work, but I think it's pretty cool that we came up so high on matters of prosperity. And as I scrolled down, I even found more things, but I didn't get all of them. But I thought that was pretty cool that we are actually touching lives in that way. And one thing I want to tell you about our class is this is probably the smallest class I've ever taught at this center. And I will say that's most likely because of the pandemic and that people still aren't comfortable coming in and being close for periods of time. And that's okay. We're finding our way back. I think perhaps this group this morning is the largest group we've had in the room since the pandemic began. But I also will share you how our community has grown. One way that we've grown substantially is through our internet connection. There are literally thousands upon thousands of people watching us on the online all the time, including in our class. And I know that because we get a report anytime somebody wants to be on our increased income program. And we have people from Europe, actually from France and Switzerland in the program. We have people from Canada and from South America in the program. So we're touching lives around the world in what we're doing. And it's really a powerful part of who we are as a community. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to share that with you. So yeah, thank you. I want to forewarn any of you that are sensitive to this that I will be speaking about things that one would find in the Christian Bible today. So just, really hang in there. We'll get through it together. But there were just some really cool things about prosperity that I wanted to share with you that came from that source. It's such an interesting thing that you can find amazing stories about being prosperous in the Christian Bible, yet some genius centuries ago came up with this idea of a vow of poverty. Kind of a funny notion that someone should promise to be poor, especially when they work for an organization that is one of the wealthiest organizations on the planet. And it all, it's just the way they decided to do it. I guess it seems humbling to have an organization covering all of your costs in life. Okay, whatever works, that's fine. But the story that I want to start with is a story of a parable. It's a story that Jesus told. And that was part of his genius, that he told stories that were intended to reach everybody in his audience at whatever level they were at. So some might think, well, that's just a nice story. And others will go, that's profound, because that's what they were willing to hear. And the story that I want to start with this morning is the parable of the talents. Interesting word, talents. And if you're unfamiliar with this story, obviously I'm going to share it with you, but I'll start by explaining the word talent. There's not agreement on what that word means. It refers to some sort of money, but the actual value of talents is undeterminable. Some scholars say that it was something between $1,000 and $30,000 for a single talent in today's money. And others say it's 20 years worth of wages. So who knows what it really means, except that it's a lot of money. So here's how the story goes. There was a man, a wealthy man, who had 3 servants, at least 3 servants. And to those 3 servants, he gave them talents according to their abilities, while he to do with what they would while he was off on an extended trip. So he was leaving town, going away for an extended period of time. We don't know how long, but in the case of these 3 servants that he had, he gave one of them 5 talents. Apparently believing this person was capable of doing good with this, he gave them the 5 talents. The next person he gave 2 talents to. And the final person, the third of the 3, he gave 1. So, and he went off on his trip. And while he was gone, the 3 servants did what they did with with the money that they were given. The one that received the 5 talents went to some kind of exchange or market, and over the period of time that the man was gone, doubled the value of that. It went so that when the wealthy man came home and asked to see his 3 servants, the first one brought 10 talents to return to the one that they worked for. The second one that had 2 did something very similar, invested it in a way that it returned 100% return on it, and he returned to the man 4 talents. The final man had a little bit of a different take on things. He apparently was afraid of the wealthy man. He obviously saw this man as very powerful, but to make sure that he didn't screw up, he took his 1 talent and he buried it. Seemed like a good idea at the time, but with seeing what his colleagues had done, apparently not. So he returned explaining that his fearfulness caused him to bury it. He went and dug it up and he returns the 1 talent. Now, the man seems like, well, he could be disappointed. But that's not quite how it reads. This is how the story ends in the 25th chapter of Matthew. For to him who has, it shall be given, and it shall increase to him. But he who has not, even that which he has shall be taken away from him. And this is how it absolutely ends. And the idle servant, they threw him in the outer darkness. And there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. Big trouble. So what does this crazy little story mean? Well, the thing that Jesus, I believe, wanted people to get from this is that the divine provides us with a life full of opportunity and things and value and resources. Is there anyone in this room that would say they have no resources in their life? Where did those resources come from? They came from the divine, because the divine is the creator of all. So whatever we have in our life, as far as opportunities and possibilities, all is part of the divine plan. We all have resources. The question is, what do you do with it? And in the case of the first 2 servants, they were productive with it. They did something, and then they had more. And out of that, the man gave them more responsibility and more resources in their lives. So the man represents the divine and the divine's relationship to all people. And those that are productive and do interesting things have more. And those that don't, and probably lose what they had. Now, that's not really the end of it, because one thing this story really points out clearly is it's not our stuff. We have all kinds of opportunities to create wealth, to create outcomes that are delightful, and that's what we're here to do, but we don't get to carry any of that with us when we leave this plane of existence. Now, the Egyptians weren't sure about that, because they used to pack those pyramids full of all kinds of goodies. But when they opened them up centuries later, the goodies are still there. So apparently, it's been proven now, you don't get to take it with you. At the same time, there's a real thing about using the resources while you're here in meaningful ways, which tells me it's not about acquiring. It's that prosperity really isn't about how much you have. It's much, much more about how you flow in your life. That's the key. How are you flowing in your life? what's coming to you and what's going from you, consciously, with your intention. What is going on that makes your life work? So this idea of a promise being attached to it, I think, comes out of that story of the talents. There's a promise that you will have a wonderful return for what you invest in your life. You can't take it with you, but while you're here, you can do all kinds of cool things and make a great difference in the world. That's important to understand so that we don't keep looking at our bank accounts or our investment accounts and thinking that that determines our prosperity. That's only a piece of it. It's a much bigger picture. There's another story out of the Bible that I think really kind of speaks to this process that we go through in seeking to be prosperous. And it has to do, did I go the wrong way? Let's keep going here. There we go. You may be helping me back there, I don't know, but it's working. So this is a drawing. Obviously, I avoided a photograph of Moses. This is a drawing of Moses speaking to the children of Israel after they had left Egypt. And as you know the story, that the Israelis were in bondage in Egypt. The story goes that they were all enslaved, and that Moses is the one that led them through the Red Sea into the Promised Land, and that it took them 40 years to figure it out. I want to assure you, it will not take you 40 years to figure this out. But in the story, the way it goes is that Egypt was that place of not enough. It was that place where they were, where everyone was enslaved and felt hopeless, and there was no future for the people of Israel. And it wasn't a happy time. And through all this happens, a very dramatic story, they did leave, and they went out into the desert. And they went looking for what they called the Promised Land. But they spent 40 years in the desert. And during that time, they were in the place of enough, because there was food provided for them. It was called manna, according to the story. And they got water that came up out of the rocks, so they always had food and water. But still, they couldn't figure out how to get to the place that they wanted, and it took them a long time. Eventually, though, at the end of Moses' life, after he had gotten really mad with them, and according to the story, God got really mad with Moses and said, okay, you don't get to go. They're going to go with new leadership. You kind of blew it. But Moses still was a very wise man and had thoughts that he wanted to share with his people before they entered the Promised Land, which of course was called the land of milk and honey, and it was the place of more than enough. It was where they had all their needs met, and they built their new civilization together. But in that story, Moses spoke. Make sure I can find the thing that he wrote. No, I can't, so I'm not going to worry about that. But the point that he wanted to make to them was that, as I recall this quote, is that he was telling the people that they had not created the good in their lives on their own. That they might say that it was through the work that I did, the toil that I did, that I now have these belongings. And Moses wanted them to know you didn't do that alone, that it required the divine within you to actually bring forth the outcome in your life, that you're in a deep partnership with something greater than you are, and that it's your job to remember that as you move through life. And that by doing that, he was complete, and he left, and they moved into their great land of milk and honey. And that being the story of Moses and the city of, or the children of Israel. So what I believe is that most people see prosperity as being money related. And I want to suggest to you that's not the case at all. That is a piece of it, but it's not all of it by any means. So I've developed this list of the elements of prosperity, holistic prosperity, the whole picture of what it means to be prosperous in our lives. And I want to ask you, as I show these to you, to think about your life and ask yourself, am I prosperous in this area of my life? As prosperous as others? So think about these. And we're going to start right at the top with spiritual prosperity. Do you have a rich spiritual life? Do you pray? Not to anyone, but do you pray knowing the truth of your life? Do you recognize yourself as the divine? I had one of the best phone calls of my life this week. A woman that has never been here, but has called me twice before, called and said that when she first called, that she was really struggling with her life. Her husband had just died. She was like 80 years old, and she didn't feel like she had it together to live the rest of her life. And we had a couple of lovely conversations, and I gave her some suggestions on some reading material, Ernest Holmes at the top. She called me this week. She said, "Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to check back in with you and make sure that I'm getting what I'm reading here." She said, "I've been reading Ernest Holmes, and I'm getting an inkling that maybe he's saying that I'm God." Bingo! You nailed it. You got it. She said, "That's amazing. I'm sitting here covered with goosebumps." And I said, "So am I." Because you figured it out. That's the truth of you. There is no separation between you and God. But there is this, a little me. And then there's the whole me. The whole me is the presence of the divine. The little me is the ego-driven part of us that thinks that we're not good enough, or that we should have more, or things should work out better, or blah, 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 blah. We don't need that part. We need to know the truth of us. And this woman found it. And she said, "I'm 81, and I've got a whole new way to look at life." And isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? Now, her next thing that she's working on is, what do I do with all these friends I've got that would have no idea how to receive this information? So she's got work to do. Good for her. Spiritual prosperity is living in that knowing that we are spirit, that we are perfect, complete, divine in every way. When we get that, we're living a spiritually prosperous life. Mentally prosperous. Being mentally prosperous is a little bit different than being spiritually prosperous, in that it is a task of being mindful of everything that you're experiencing in your life and recognizing that what you're thinking about is what you're creating, and that with your thoughts, you're determining the experience of your life. Now, most people don't get that. They think they're allowed to think anything they want and still get whatever it is that they want to have in their lives. They think they can be judgmental. They think they can be caught up in things of seeing problems and being challenged, and yet that they should be able to have everything that they want. But the pathway to having prosperity in our lives is based on how we think. Are we thinking clearly? Are we open to the idea of having these things and recognizing that every thought that flows through our mind, every word that comes out of our mouth, as well as everything that we do, has everything to do with the development of a prosperous life? That you can't do it without that. That you can't live in that place of not enough in your thinking and then expect to have more than enough in your world. Doesn't work. The next one is emotional prosperity. I believe that we have the ability to be emotionally prosperous. That when our emotional body is working from a place of centeredness, of being powerful, of being in a state of love, being joyous, making every day a happy day, those kind of things allow us. Most people, again, don't think that they're creating their emotions. They think that their emotions come and there's secret information in their emotions. I want to assure you that's not the case, that you are creating your emotional state every moment. And if you don't like your emotional state, change it. Choose a different emotion. Do it consciously. Most people think they have to work through their emotions. No, you don't. All you have to do is say, no more being angry, no more being sad, no more being afraid. I'm going to be happy. You can do that. In a heartbeat, you can do that. And when you choose peace, joy, happiness, love in your life, love's not an emotion, but when you choose to know those things and to live your life from those things, you will have an emotionally prosperous life. Actually, emotions are one of the easiest ways to see someone's prosperity because they're smiling, because they're joyous, and they're having the life they want to have. And they got nothing to grumble about, no matter what's going on. Emotional prosperity. Physical prosperity. Certainly health is a part of that. We say that in class with our increased income prayer. We say perfect health, perfect wealth, and perfect happiness. Health is a part of that. Now, I don't judge anyone on the state of their health, but I do say that we are all responsible for our health, that we are creating it, and that if we are conscious about it in the physicality of our bodies and being in bodies, that's part of our level of prosperity. And we need not be afraid of that. Relational prosperity. Have you ever thought of that in that term, that the relationships in your life demonstrate prosperity? They do. They do. Who is the main person that you rely on in your life? Maybe you have a life partner, maybe you don't. But still, there's someone that you turn to. I read an interesting article this week that since the pandemic, males in the United States have gone down about 30% on having close friends. That somehow women aren't stupid enough to do this. But that men somehow are isolating in the midst of all this and not sharing their hearts and having connection with other men. It's kind of sad. Makes me want to go to lunch with my friend John Gustafson next week, which is already planned. So I invite you to make sure that your relationships are solid right now because they feed you. I'm going to talk about you, Charlie, for just a second. Charlie Shepard was doing what so many of us do in this pandemic, and he was staying at home. And he went to his doctor. I may screw this up, but I'll get close. His doctor said, "You're a social person. You can't sit at home. It's going to kill you. You get out. Go to your church." And I'll swear, the man's been here almost every week since. And I love it. And I think about that, and I think how smart, how wise of your doctor to say that and of you to listen. And having you in this room touches my heart. So I'm always glad when I see you here. Thank you, Charlie. Give Charlie a hand. Our relationships are a source of prosperity. They feed us, and they give us the opportunity to support other people in ways that really make a difference. So look at your friendships as a state of prosperity in your life. Outcome prosperity. I absolutely believe this. I believe that everything we do creates outcomes. The question is, are we creating the outcomes we want? People who are prosperous, people who are being prosperous in all of these areas, have the outcomes they want. They have the things that they put their intention on actually be created into their lives. They don't face things where they go, "I've failed at this. It's over. I can't do it." They don't say things like that. People who are prosperous get the outcomes they seek in their lives. And that certainly is a form of prosperity. And then the end of the list, and I would suggest to you these are in somewhat of a list of priorities. The final one on the list, you know what it is? Financial. Of course, the thing everybody thinks prosperity is about. And it is. I'm not telling you it's not, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing, and it relates to every one of these, is being in flow with life and knowing that you're bringing things to life. That's where we start. You don't start by getting things. You start by giving yourself to life. And when you do, the outcome is extraordinary. And so much stuff shows up in your life that you have to figure out what stuff you want to keep for the time being and what stuff needs to move on. I think one of the biggest parts of this flow idea comes from the intention of being prosperous. Prosperous people give. They give themselves to life in many different ways. Now, something that I always talk about in class, and I want to talk about it today, is this idea of tithing. Tithing is a really interesting idea, giving 10% of the resources that come into your life to the source of your spiritual good. I believe that tithing is a fundamental way to be in that flow of prosperity. And I'm not selling you on giving your money to this center. I'm wanting to sell you on the idea of staying in the flow in your life and making sure that you are the one that's priming that flow in your life. Tithing works for me. The reason it works, and I see it work with so many people, is that it's really psychological. It's that I can joyously take 10% of what I have and identify and support the source of my spiritual growth, the thing at the top of the list. I can do that and feel good about it because it's 10%. It's a significant amount of money for most anybody, but it's not so much it's going to hurt you. So by doing that, and the way I've learned to do it is a 10-10-80 plan. 10% of your money goes to your tithe, 10% goes into your savings account or your investment account or somewhere there, and 80% pays for your lifestyle. It's a nice balance, and it really does work. And before you know it, you've really got a lot of money set aside because the tithing has kept things growing and moving and happening, and it really balances out. So Barbara's the one that brought me back to tithing years ago. I'd set that down when I was a kid and left the Baptist church. But I had a whole new way of looking at it from what I saw Barbara do and have not stopped since and never will. So tithing really is a big part of that in my life. One of my favorite stories about tithing comes from a colleague out in Southern California, in San Diego, Reverend Kevin Busey. Great guy. He has a great center down there in San Diego. But when he started that, and early on, he was having some money challenges with it. His teacher was a man named Lloyd Tupper. And Lloyd Tupper, when he said, we're not bringing in enough, he said, are you tithing? Yeah. He said, so tithe more. What? He said, tithe more than 10%. Okay. And so a few weeks later, he called Lloyd, and Lloyd said to Kevin, how's it going? He said, well, it's a little better, but it hasn't really moved like I want it to. He said, then tithe more. What? He said, tithe 30% of the money coming into your center and watch what happens. He said, okay. And he said, do it with an attitude of gratitude. Be grateful for it. Okay, so he did. And I think that center now is one of the wealthiest in our movement. I don't know that he's still doing 30%, but I want you to know that what it did was it shifted his thinking. It shifted his understanding and created the outcome that he wanted. It's a powerful way to look at it. So this idea of the promise. You have to believe that it's a promise. You have to believe that this is the truth of you, that you have everything that you could possibly need or want. You just have to be open to it. And you have to be willing to do your part to make it happen. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes so that you can live that life. And that takes some trust. Some might say it takes risk, but I think it takes trust. And the risk is not there. It's just trust. And if you're willing to do that in your life, that you will get the outcome that you desire, no matter what, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. Believe in yourself as a prosperous person. Believe that that's the life that you've come to live. And then you'll have what you need to do what is yours to do. And you will bless all the people that cross your path by being who you're being and being in that dynamic flow of spirit. This, to me, is true prosperity. And I share these ideas with you, knowing that they will make a difference in your life because I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you.